As I said last week to the Commission, the trust between police and the communities they serve is an integral part of the safety of those very communities. Equally important is ensuring that officers who encounter dangerous, life-threatening situations have the knowledge, the skill, and judgment necessary to react in an appropriate manner. There's many questions for you to answer. Let me just suggest a few. And when I say suggest, I mean that. This is within your jurisdiction. You have the opportunity to take this discussion any place that you want to take it. Let me talk about a few of the questions that I think should be looked at. Is the current training for Ohio police officers appropriate and adequate? Are the requirements to become a peace officer the right ones? Currently, the Ohio Revised Code says that in order to be a peace officer in the state of Ohio, an individual must complete a basic training program and not have a felony conviction. That's pretty much what the code says. Are these statutory requirements to become a police officer sufficient? Would be another question. Additionally, are 605 hours of basic training that the Commission requires enough to become a qualified police officer in the state? Is this the right number? Should there be more? Should there be different? Are peace officer candidates getting enough hands-on in the field training? That's another question. Are students, those students being tested for the right set of skills? Are the 66 police academies across Ohio doing a good enough job training officers? And how do we know that? Is there consistency in training among the academies? Are the academies demonstrating fidelity to the curriculum the Commission has set for basic training? And once basic training is completed, is the current exam process the best way to measure competencies and preparedness to be a police officer? The final written test requires a 70% to pass. Is 70% the appropriate number? And are officers who become certified actually putting into practice the skills and the techniques they learn in their basic training? As you all start to really dig deep into all of this, the key question is this: is enough of the basic curriculum directly applicable to training in use of force, as well as training in interpersonal relations, diversity, gender, and racial bias? Do officers receive enough of the appropriate training in the use of force in active shooter situations? Does the current basic training adequately prepare an officer with the tools necessary to define when an active shooter situation does exist? Is there enough training for critical decision making under stress? Can more be done to train law enforcement personnel in making split-second life or death decisions? We've been talking primarily about the basic training. Now let's look for a moment at the training that comes after an officer is certified and sworn in, which we are calling today the advanced training that the Ohio Police Officers Training Academy provides. Is every peace officer in Ohio receiving enough continuing education, enough advanced training? Might be another question to look at. As you examine all of these training questions, it is also imperative to assess if officers are adequately prepared to deal with people with mental health issues. Every day, law enforcement officers are faced with situations involving mentally ill people who are in crisis. Are officers getting appropriate training in the basic curriculum to deal with these kinds of situations? Is there enough appropriate advanced training as well? These are just a few of the initial questions that I would suggest might be looked at. As you delve into these important issues, I know that there will be countless more and some others that go beyond training. Issues like hiring practices. Are the right questions being asked when local police agencies hire newly certified police officers? How well and how much are local agencies, police agencies, doing to recruit women and minorities. And I want to thank you for your commitment to this endeavor. You have a vital, important opportunity to determine if there are ways to make the current system of training better for law enforcement officers, better assist them as they help their community and serve their community. As I said, this is just the start of the issues. It's entirely within your jurisdiction where you really go. Let me suggest maybe a few other things that you may want to do. You may want to look at what other states do. You may want to visit some other states. You may want to look at what's done on the national level. You may want to try to determine, the best practices. Who really in Ohio? 66 academies, Ohio State Highway Patrol as well. Where is the training being done the best? What are the best practices? Those are some of the questions I think that you should look at. That's just kind of a broad overview. As you know, this came about as a result of tragedies, horrible tragedies that we read about, heard about, questions that have been asked by the public, questions that have been asked by the media. Governor Kasich put together putting together a group which will be looking at a lot of different issues. As the Attorney General of the state, I felt I had an obligation to try to address the issues that deal specifically with police training, because our office does have some role in that. The Ohio Police Officers Training Academy, from the staff that works there, as well as the Ohio Police Officers Training Commission. So your focus is on training. But most of the questions that have been asked in the public, media, many times do go back to training. When the conduct of a police officer is examined by a grand jury, examined by anybody who's doing a review, what that officer did, was that officer appropriate, what he or she did in that split-second decision? We many times get back to the question, what was the training that that police officer received? Once again, back to the training question. So everything, to some extent, comes back to training, comes back to recruitment, comes back to not just basic training, what's the advanced training, how appropriate is it, and we do a better job. As you listen to the presentation from the staff, I would point one other thing. In the last 4 years, there's been some fairly significant changes in what is involved in police officer training in the state of Ohio. As I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that has changed is the advanced training that is made available to police departments from the Ohio Police Officers Training Academy in London, Richmond. It's put much more of a focus on getting that training out to the officers and not requiring them to always come to one of those academies. The 4 hours that I talked about earlier, the money from that 4 hours for additional training comes in fact, that reimbursement money comes in fact from casino money that was specifically set aside by the state legislature for police training. Again, what the Attorney General has the ability to set certain hours, additional hours, but when those hours are set under current law, they must be paid for, or work gets paid for by $20 per hour reimbursement to each of those police departments that are utilizing that training. Currently, they're 4 hours. Just clarification. Before I turn it over to the chairman,